In a world where people are losing their minds, who will be the voice of sanity, of logic, of rationale, of morality and truth? This podcast is looking for like-minded people to stand up to the insane and be real. The Recovery Atheist podcast is calling you to step forward and be counted. Welcome to the Voice of Change. Welcome to the Recovery Atheist podcast.
Well, hello everybody out there, Podcast Nation. Thank you for joining me on the Recovery Atheist podcast for another episode. I am so excited today to be able to introduce this episode and the guest I had. Just a wonderful, amazing time. I was completely honored and really surprised and shocked to be able to talk with this individual. He is a very busy man, and in my opinion, one of the most influential atheists in the country. He's well known across the world. Seth Andrews, who's also known as the Thinking Atheist, and has a Thinking Atheist podcast. Just an amazing opportunity for me and my podcast to be able to get this content out to you in this discussion I had with Seth. It was just great being able to talk with him, talk about a few things that we both have opinions on, and how we feel about certain things as being atheists. It was just a very, for me anyway, informational, educational conversation into the mind of another atheist that I look at as a mentor. So sit down, enjoy, get yourself something to drink, some chips, some popcorn, whatever you want that way, and just really enjoy the content that, I was able to get with Seth. Hope you enjoy.
When I was devoutly religious, I used to think that in order to enjoy all the best stuff in life, you had to believe in God. You had to believe in God to have goodness, to know right from wrong, to properly experience love, to have any sense of purpose, right? Because without God, why bother? Finally, when I crawled out of my religious cocoon, I realized that those ideas had been so terribly wrong and damaging in many ways. It kept me from discovering the real world, a world beyond religion that was so much better, so much more accepting, so much more goodness and love and beauty. I was able to generate my own sense of purpose instead of having my life spoon-fed to me or handed to me by a God belief, a dogma, a holy book, a priest, whatever. I'd never go back. If I was given the opportunity to go back into the quote-unquote safety of religion, I'd never want to go back, because life without this idea of God's is so much better. There is a better world to be discovered beyond God belief, beyond the superstitions of our ancestors, beyond these really bad ideas. That life is awesome without Allah.
The United States of America is a Christian nation. If you believe the rhetoric of many Republican political candidates, you'd certainly think so. Former presidential candidate John McCain once said, "I would probably have to say yes, that the Constitution established the United States of America as a Christian nation." His choice for vice president in 2008, Sarah Palin, has called the United States a Christian nation and suggested that it's mind-boggling to think otherwise. At George W. Bush's inauguration, his very first act was to have the son of Christian evangelist Billy Graham officially dedicate the presidential inauguration to Jesus Christ, invoking the Father, the Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Many U.S. presidents have sworn their oath on the Christian Bible. God Bless America has become a familiar slogan in good times and bad, reflected on banners, t-shirts, church marquees, and songs like Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA. The internet is populated with websites like KeepGodInAmerica.com, which promotes the Christian Bible and declares that without God, there is no America. You can sign online petitions like this one, which declares that God ordains our leaders for his own glory and the public good. Certainly, the United States protects the freedom of its citizens to call down blessings from their deities, Christian or otherwise. Free citizens have the right to pray, worship, and practice their religions however they wish, within the boundaries of the law. But did our founding fathers create a Christian nation? Well, if they did, it's odd that God is not mentioned once in the U.S. Constitution. The mention of religion in Article 6 of the First Amendment served to separate religion from government altogether. The Founding Fathers actually guaranteed the right of the non-religious to hold public office. And the language doesn't even use the word Christian. It says religious, covering all faiths. God, Creator, and Providence are mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. However, after Cornwallis surrendered to George Washington at the Battle of Yorktown in 1781, the Declaration of Independence was not the document the founders used to govern. Instead, they reconvened and drew up a different document to define U.S. laws. First, the Articles of Confederation, then the Constitution. The Founding Fathers didn't put "In God We Trust" on U.S. coins. That was done during the time of the Civil War. They didn't put "In God We Trust" on U.S. paper currency. That was done in 1957. The words "under God" weren't part of the original Pledge of Allegiance. Those words were added by Congress in 1954, as the West was making a statement against the quote-unquote godlessness of communism by also instituting a National Day of Prayer and replacing "E pluribus unum" with "In God We Trust" as our national motto. Contrary to the assertions of the religious, many of our founding fathers were either deist or ambivalent about the Christian God, including Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, John Adams, Thomas Paine, and even George Washington. Thomas Jefferson, a deist, rejected concepts like the Trinity, the virgin birth, the divinity of Christ, the resurrection, original sin, and other core Christian beliefs. Further separating our founders from a Christian nation is Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli, signed by John Adams in 1797, which stated clearly that, quote, "The government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion." So, if our founding fathers weren't necessarily Christian, they excluded God from our Constitution, had nothing to do with any mentions of God in our Pledge of Allegiance, they omitted God from our money, they removed any religious requirements to hold public office, and declared publicly that the United States is not founded on Christianity. Are the politicians and pundits on the religious right being completely honest with themselves and with the public about their attitudes and intentions? Are they attempting to integrate their own religious agendas into a government designed to operate religion-free? Are they using God in an emotional appeal to win support and votes from a largely ignorant electorate? Has Christianity or any other religion contaminated the secular framework for government established over 200 years ago? The next time a politician says that the United States is a Christian nation, it might be a good time to give them and the millions of Americans watching a history lesson.
One of the biggest things I want to talk with you about today, Seth, is being able to talk about how our nation, there's people on the conservative right side that will sit there and say that our country is, based off the, being a Christian nation, which when you look at the historical way of looking at it, it's not set up that way. It was set up for us leaving England because of the tyranny that was going there. We wanted to be able to believe the way that we wanted to believe here in this country. You're having to deal with it out there where being one of the voices, the big voices of this movement that we're in, that you have to deal with people talking with you and throwing different belief systems at you about how this is and that you're wrong and we're right. How do you deal with that? I mean, because for me personally, I just had it recently done to me about, hey, well, how can you deny that this is a Christian nation? It gets frustrating.
It's very frustrating to have to sit there and talk with them about that and try to prove it. And they don't ever want to believe it. Even if you show them the facts. So what are your views on this nation and just the secular part of it, how progressive it is and what this country is based on?
I used to engage in the way that you're mentioning. You go at them and you're like, well, the founding fathers were not all Christians. And even those who had a God belief were not necessarily theists or certainly Christians. And God wasn't originally on the money and in the Pledge of Allegiance. We go through this sort of laundry list of bullet points that we have become so familiar with. I used to do that. And over the years, I've come to the understanding and realization that the people who are claiming we are a Christian nation, in so many cases, are not doing so based on any caring at all about what's factual. This is an emotional connection that they have. They have always believed it. And for them, belief is knowledge. I think it feeds a kind of proprietorship or ownership, even a superiority complex over the country. And that serves them, it's a little bit of an inflation of the ego, or certainly a sense of divine purpose. I'm a crusader protecting a Christian nation. And, that's sort of I call it theological masturbation sometimes. It makes them feel really good. They're self-gratifying as they anoint themselves these warriors in God's army protecting a Christian nation. And, other people, I think they perhaps don't want to know because they're terrified of genuinely being challenged. So you reinforce the walls of your own bubble, and there's safety there. The world is simple there. There's a lot of gears in that machine, a lot of reasons that people do what they do. And I used to go at them with those bullet points, and my tactic has changed. First of all, I don't spend too much time on the people who are closed systems. Not that I don't counter them, but engaging and engaging and engaging and engaging over and over and over again is, in so many instances, just folly. I'm talking about the people who are totally closed off, not listening. They give you that blank mannequin stare kind of thing.
Right.
I think it's important they be confronted with the data, with the facts. But I don't spend a lot of time thinking, I'm going to rescue them from themselves. If they are not listening, my time's valuable. My time would be better spent on those who are genuinely wondering and curious, and that door's cracked open. Maybe they're doubting a little bit. Maybe they're interested in the answer. If I do engage, I like to use more of the Socratic method. I leave the burden of proof on them. What was the religion of Thomas Jefferson? And then, you see them all of a sudden, for the first time, perhaps in their lives, they have to say, he was a Christian. How do you know that? What are his writings on that? On what is this position based? George Washington, did he take his oath on a Bible, or was it another document? Benjamin Franklin, can you tell me about his religious positions? When did under God get put into the Pledge of Allegiance? Was it always there? Who wrote the Pledge of Allegiance? You can just sort of take them down this road, and you feel the increasing sense of frustration. They start to squirm a little bit. What was the original motto that was on our coins and dollar bills? Do you know what decades those were changed and why? Boom, 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 boom. But you just ask questions. What this does is it leaves the burden of proof where it belongs, and you're not coming at them with these sort of baseball bat to the face declarative statements. You're just asking questions. And it's always interesting to watch people that they get frustrated. It's a little bit like how I handle casual Bible thumping Christians. The Bible is absolutely true. Okay, well, who wrote the book of Genesis? It's the most basic of questions. And they just cock their head like a dog, because they live usually in a world where they've never been meaningfully challenged. You believe the 10 Commandments are the most important commandments ever given to humankind, and we desperately need them to be a moral society? And they say, absolutely, the 10 Commandments. I will pay you $50 if you can name 6 of the 10 Commandments.
Correct.
And watch them just, and those types of exercises, they get frustrated a little bit, but I have gone from banging my head against the wall because I'm not able to crack through because I'm throwing data. People don't change their minds from data. They just don't, in almost all cases, because they've got an emotional connection. So what I do is I try to plant the seed where maybe later, deep down in the darkness of their rooms, when they are alone and being more honest with themselves, they begin to doubt and begin to wrestle and begin to wonder, maybe, how does that work? Does he have a point? Where did that come from? Have I done my homework? And that's the only tactic I've found that, is certainly, it's more, I think it's more fruitful. It's more fruitful than just screaming data points at people. Forgive the long answer, but that's kind of where I've come.
No, I mean, that's very good information. Yeah, you can't sit there and keep getting frustrated with it, like you said, and keep coming at them. That's not going to make any change that way, or make them at least look at it and think, well, maybe I need to investigate it a little bit more. Doing it the way that you're saying is going to put that spark of, well, maybe I need to educate myself a little bit more about
Noah's
this.
Ark is a great exercise in this. Do you believe that there was a great global flood and that Noah built an ark? And Bible believers still in the Christian church, they'll say, well, yeah, okay, yeah. So you just go at them with the logistics of it, Do you believe, how did Noah live to be 500 when he started? How did one guy, 500 years old, build a stadium-sized boat using trees and tar? How do you think he did that? How did penguins walk 8,000 miles to board a ship in the middle of the Middle Eastern desert? And how did they survive? How did the predator and prey animals coexist? Where did all the food stores come? Meat for the carnivores and plant life for the herbivores? And how did the mussels keep from atrophying? And how did 8 people commit incest to create more than 5,000 ethnic groups in 4,000 years? I mean, you can just ask them basic questions.
Yeah.
About the story. And again, for many, a common denominator among at least American cultural Christians is they believe in belief. They love the idea of Christianity. But they don't have to know anything about it if they love the idea. So when you are like, all right, well, how much do you really know about the faith you're telling me is true with a capital T? And you just find specific popular stories and you ask them basic questions, and I'll bet 9 times out of 10, tilt, and they're just not able to process. But this is important because I think it allows them a moment where they have to actually put up or shut up. And it's my hope that at some point when nobody's looking and they feel safe, maybe they'll ask themselves the same questions and challenges as well.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Hopefully that'll be the case. One of the biggest things that I'm passionate about that I've watched on your videos is talking about child indoctrination when it comes to being in the churches. My dad is still a pastor of a Pentecostal church down in Southern Indiana. I was raised in it. I remember being in church from 2 weeks on, and it was just part of life, and was told that everything that I was reading and doing was true, and that there was nothing else out there that was, that could say different. One of your lines that you use, which I completely agree, is that it's child abuse when it comes to these children that are indoctrinated in these churches and never really given the right to be able to make a decision, learn from it as they get older, and whether or not they want to be a part of it. They're just right off the bat from a young age lied to. And that's the way I felt about it, is I have felt that I have been lied to about things and never was given a chance to investigate it until now that I'm in my adulthood. But I mean, what are some of your thoughts about that? I mean, the video I've shared it before on Facebook, but the video about it and how you still know the pledge, the church pledge, and the things that you would do when you were in class. It's amazing. I still have that stuff too. And
well, there's a lot to unpack. I want to make clear, in no way am I trying to minimize or marginalize child abuse by saying that indoctrination is abuse. And it's a little bit different, because while I was taught a lie, my parents were not lying to me, if that makes any sense, because they were convinced it was the truth. They felt like they were doing the right and moral thing.
Yeah.
But I share your frustration. You get older and you're like, they didn't give me a chance. They didn't ask me to be a scientist and explore my world and find my path and kick the tires and tap on the glass and see if it was true. You know, check me on this. You got to find your own way. Here's what I think, but you need to determine what you think. We didn't have that option. This is the truth. This is the way. When I was in the third grade, came home with some, I don't know, something I'd learned in homeroom about Neanderthal man. And, you know, my parents were so flipped out. They immediately just ripped us out of school, public school, and put us in a private school cocoon so that we would only have reinforcement of what they thought. And, you know, I have resentment about that. I don't resent my parents for lying. They're indoctrinated, you know, they're victims of bad ideas. And so I try to see it through that light. But I often have people come to me and say, well, why can't you just let people believe what they want to believe? Why do you have to be such a pain in the ass? And why do you have to always poke at the hornet's nest? And I'm like, well, in utopia, everybody believing what they want to believe in an island unto themselves sounds just fine. But beliefs translate into actions or inactions. Beliefs ripple outward and affect the world around us. And beliefs, bad beliefs, so often harm people. So if you train up a child to believe they are born unworthy and deserving of torment and damnation, and you get them to question their own, identity, purpose, sexuality, desires, whatever, you know, you have hamstrung them in so many ways. If you believe that the government is using vaccines to track people, or that vaccines cause autism, so you don't vaccinate your young and vulnerable children. This is an example of how bad beliefs can harm people. And I love that Ingersoll quote. I'm paraphrasing, but he said, you know, the more false we destroy, the more room there will be for the true. And that's really been one of my codas. You know, let's go out and destroy the false, not because we don't want diversity, not because we don't want free speech or free expression, not because we want to strip away people's identity. But if someone's going out and they believe in actual, you know, something that results in harm, I think the natural inclination by moral people should be to go out and try to eliminate or at least reduce harm as much as we can. And so often that starts with ideas, bad science, you know, hatred, bigotry that's often taught, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, I in my own life, I look at, we were just talking online about these cocoons of religious homeschools, hugely unregulated and unaccountable and unsupervised. They are, quote unquote, educating young, vulnerable children in these tiny pods where they end up unprepared for the world around them and often hamstrung with tons of anti-science and guilt and shame and all of those types of things. You know, I think we have to go out. Let's destroy the false. Let's make more room for the true.
Well, and see, it's funny that you mentioned that. I mean, I was homeschooled as a child. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It was very much a cocoon. We had about 3 or 4 other families that were involved within our church. We were all kept within that little bubble. It had this feeling. We used the ACE material.
Yeah, we did too. The PACEs, the PACE lesson plans.
Exactly. So I completely understand. Like when someone talks about homeschooling and what it's like and what they've been through with it, I completely understand it. I definitely felt sheltered, obviously. The only friends I had were church friends. It really, if there's anything when I was growing up as a child that I would look back on and say, wow, that was very cultish, that would be one of them, because I wasn't able to get to know other people and connect with other people and just get to know what life is about. It was all within my little bubble.
Well, I think also that provides utility when you other people without really getting to know them. And this was the case with me. You know, I had othered people. I didn't connect with them. If I knew some, I didn't really know that I knew some. But I mean, I was a staunch evangelical conservative Republican. So if you are not a conservative, you're the other. If you're a Democrat, you're the other. If you're an immigrant, you're the other. If you're a non-heterosexual, you're the other. If you're a non-Christian, you're the other. And, you know, it was easier to label them and put them in this tiny, simple box where I could just sort of discard the box. And when you come out and you begin to introduce yourself to all of these things that you were once taught to be suspicious of or fear outright, you realize, hey, wait a minute, you know, they're beautiful people. They have so much to offer. They haven't stripped me of anything. I'm not in danger. My life is not diminished. You know, you realize that it's a much more beautiful world outside the walls of these tiny pods, the walls that we once felt kept us safe, when in truth, they just isolated us and prevented us from being introduced to a lot of beauty that I think, you know, this life deserves. We deserve to know it exists, to be able to embrace it and enjoy it. You know, that I think is the true and healthy incarnation of diversity. It took me 30 years to discover it, but I'm glad I finally got there. So,
yeah. So last thing, or one of the things I definitely want to talk before we get toward the end of our time, is about morality. I had a thing just recently. I'm a sober living house manager, and we do an AA house meeting here at the house. And someone was talking about, we happen to do the We Agnostics, which is about having God in your life to be able to have recovery. And someone was talking about without God, they wouldn't be a good person and compassionate and empathetic. And it got around to me, and I was like, you know, without God, you know, I don't need a God to have morality. I don't need a God to be able to be compassionate and empathetic and loving and caring. I don't need a God to ask for forgiveness. I already have it from the people around me. What are your thoughts on just when people want to say the whole morality without God, what are your morals then? Because go ahead.
Well, forgive the interruption. I'm sorry.
No worries.
You know, Alcoholics Anonymous has helped a lot of people. We actually did a show on addiction recovery a while back. You know, one of their things is you need to focus on something. And I think often they will say God, but if you don't believe in a literal God, then find something to focus on. But the problem that I have with it is that you are focusing on an external, relying on an external to help solve what is happening internally. And at the end of the day, even if you find inspiration from someone or something else, you're still doing all the recovering. You're still doing the heavy lifting. Mm-hmm. I'm also resistant to this idea that you can't do it unless God. And, you know, doing the right and moral and ethical thing, you know, when we speak about it in terms of religious claims, there's a lot there, a lot of layers to that onion. I think in some ways, I think it's saying that you have to have God to be moral is a way for the pious to appear morally superior. Mm-hmm. I think there's also just an assumption. They've always been told, well, of course, God put the morality there. And even the atheists that don't believe in God, they're sort of shoplifting the morality of God. They wouldn't be moral at all without God. Even as atheists, they need God. Maybe they don't even know they need God. You know, they do that tap dance. And I remember navigating that when I came out of religion, going, well, why am I good? And I began to learn about evolved ethical systems and cooperation in the species, way back to the early days of humanity on the African savanna, cooperation. We were more likely to survive and thrive when we helped each other. The lone wolf acting on his own behalf out in the middle of whatever, he was much, much less likely to live through the day. And it makes a lot of sense in that context that we evolved as cooperative beings. Helping you helps humanity, helps me. Even if altruism has sort of an ancillary, self-serving aspect to it, so what? I'm still being altruistic. I'm still helping someone else without a expectation of immediate reward. More than all of that is this terrifying notion that I need a third party to tell me that murder and rape are wrong. That's a little scary to me.
Correct. Yes.
And I've heard this said. I heard it said at a debate once. There was a guy who said, well, if I didn't believe in God, I'd be a violent person. I would harm people. And I'm like, well, I think someone at the debate said, well, in this case, I'm kind of glad you believe in a God because we wouldn't want you out hurting people. But his whole premise was, if I didn't hold this belief, I would be a danger to society. But the truth is that whatever his perception is, the person who is keeping him from being a danger to society, in his instance, is him. It's himself. It's his ideas. And I just would like to see us sort of slough off all the superstitious backstory and understand that good for goodness sake makes total sense. Makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, from a human standpoint. It also, I think, adds a sense of urgency because if we don't believe in a cosmic judge and we don't think it's all going to get sort of equilibriumed out in the afterlife and it's all going to, what goes around is always going to come around. And if I'm poor in this life or sick in this life or we haven't cured cancer in this life or there's all these problems in this life, well, one day, if you don't think there's going to be necessarily a one day, a life 2.0 in the clouds, then I think you become much more focused on solving real world problems in the here and now. I also, and again, forgive the long answer, I think one of the reasons we fight religion, I understand the utility of religion for a number of reasons. One is I totally get someone who has a miserable life in this world. They don't have enough food to eat. They have a terrible autoimmune disorder. They're being abused. Something else is going on that has caused them. They're oppressed by a totalitarian regime, whatever. And this idea that one day after I die, I will be free. I will have a whole body. I will live forever. I'll have perfect joy and perfect peace. I get that. It's a tremendously powerful coping mechanism for hurting people. And I think religion will never go away, but it certainly won't go away while we have this tremendous set of oppressive problems facing humanity. If we are able to alleviate suffering in this life and make an environment where people aren't having to rely on the idea of one day after I die, my life won't be hell, but they can have a better existence now, then I think their reliance on this sort of pie in the sky, happy ending narrative becomes a lot less important, becomes a lot less critical. That's another reason that I'm a humanist first. I'm not an atheist first. I'm a humanist. I want to try to solve human problems. And I think if we solve our problems as human beings, then this sort of coping mechanism for thinking, well, it'll get better one day because it's awful now, that begins to wane a little bit. So anyway, there's a lot there, but that's kind of where I fall.
Well, that's very good. I love Hitch when he talks about whatever a religious group can do that's good, an atheist can do it just as well. And yeah. I truly believe in that, that you don't need to have God or religion to be able to be a good person and do good things in the world.
I'm sorry, I've got a dog here. He was pawing at me, so I made him part of the interview. I hope that's okay.
That's awesome.
Hitch had a great, he would ask his interlocutor, name a right and moral action that a believer could do that a non-believer couldn't do. And it's such a good question. Occasionally I'll hear we can pray. But, that is, does that qualify as an action? Then, that's kind of an arbitrary decision made by the believer. But as far as alleviating suffering and helping other people, there's nothing that a believer could do. And I think it's more noble to do it not because you fear hell or anticipate another jewel in your crown. I think a lot of people in the church are really, really, really good people.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing humanism. They've got, the God window dressing on it. It's kind of this noble thing, but I don't think they're haughty, pious people necessarily. A lot of people, they just, they've always felt that way. But they take tremendous pleasure out of doing humanistic work. And I'm like, the truth is we could do this same stuff. We can go out and distribute food, and we can help build houses for those who are homeless, and we can solve the community's problems. You could do all that with all this superstitious backstory. And I feel that way very much. A lot of humanism going on out there. It's masked as religion, but it's really about people.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way about my parents, that they're good people. They really truly believe in helping others and being humanistic. But yeah, like you said, it's covered within that veil of the religious, and religion and God. So, So what do you have? What do you have coming up here in the future? I'm always excited when I see new things coming out from you, whether it be podcasting, like the last ones you did about things that annoy you or pet peeves, arguments that are brought up. You had a 2-parter about it with many different atheists coming on your show and talking about it, about different arguments that are made and how they can be annoying at times.
And that show came about because I wanted to sort of enjoy this shared frustration that we all feel, not enjoy, but we can all relate to the frustrations of those apologist arguments. But what I didn't anticipate quite as much, but what really happened was all of my guests then gave their refutations or responses to those apologetics. And they're so rich, they're so good and so useful, so that other people who are listeners, they can hear the argument from morality or design or beauty or complexity or whatever, the cosmological argument, or read this secondary supplemental text or whatever. And, because the responses were so rich, I think those will help many of our listeners in their own discussions. Moving forward, I've got a conversation I'm about to release with human rights activist Miriam Namazi. We're talking about Islam in a documentary she just produced called Women Leaving Islam. So we have a hard conversation about a very, very dangerous fundamentalist religion in the actually in the world, not as much in the U.S. right now, but we don't just track on Islam. We get into Christianity and even some of the other faiths. So anyway, there's an audio and video of that coming up. I've got kind of a general knowledge show because we do so many heavy topics. Occasionally, I like to lighten it up with just fun learning. Let's think about the everyday stuff. Hey, when you eat mac and cheese, is the cheese powder actual cheese, or what is that stuff? Why do I forget somebody's name as soon as they tell me their name? I'm at a party. What's your name? 30 seconds later, I can't remember it. Why does that happen? What's an Epsom salt? You put it in the bath. I have no idea what an Epsom salt is. We talk about that. We talk about why we have useless hair on our arms and legs. And, it's just one of those shows, general knowledge, trivia type broadcasts that people really do tend to love. I'm still talking about my latest book, Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian. I'm still autographing copies for anybody who wants them, SethAndrews.com. And I'm working on ideas for yet another book for maybe, 2022, but I don't want to spill too many beans on that. It may not even come to fruition. You know how it is when you're generating ideas. You say, this will be a great idea. And then you wake up the next day and say, nah, I don't think so. But, I'm trying to keep it interesting after I've been doing this since 2009. So, it's a challenge to try to continue, especially when there's a podcast on every website almost. It's one of those things where to keep it interesting and compelling it's always a challenge, but I'll give everybody everything I got. And, you can see it at thethinkingatheist.com and SethAndrews.com.
Wonderful. Yeah, I plan on, I haven't done it yet, but I plan on buying one of your books, and I definitely want to get get it autographed. So
You're very kind. Thank you.
I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, I really need to do that because I heard it on your podcast. And I'm like, yeah, I need to do that.
Very kind.
But, I can't wait until we're able to have the conventions back up again, the conferences. You've been to Minneapolis once before. I live in Duluth, just north of there. I can't wait to be able to see you in person. Maybe the Unholy Trinity comes around and I get to see you and Matt and Aaron. So hopefully 2021 will go well, and we'll get some hope with that to where we'll be able to do some more traveling and I can be able to observe that. I want to thank you for coming on. It has been a real honor. I know when you told me you would, it was just like, I can't believe it. It was.
Oh, well, no, it's an honor to be asked, my friend. And I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm going to look forward to everything else that you have coming out, and just see where your podcasts go. I know you're being a big help to my podcast, being able to allow me to interview you for it. And I just hope your family is well, your puppies are well, and that you have a great 2021. Thank you for coming on with me today, Seth.
Thank you very much.
Well, there you have it. Just an amazing time that I got to have with Seth Andrews. An amazing conversation. I am honored to be able to sit and talk with such an inspiration to me. He is such an inspiration to me, and a big reason why I have the podcast that I have today. Him in the Unholy Trinity with Aaron Ra and Matt Dillahunty, and then him. In my opinion, he is definitely one of the most influential atheists out there. And I would suggest that you go and check out his podcast and all the videos he has on YouTube. I've watched thousands of hours probably of him, and he has taught me a lot about what to bring to the table when it comes to my content. So I hope you enjoyed it. It's been an amazing week for me being able to talk with Seth Andrews and also Aaron Ra. I couldn't have asked for a better situation for me this week in my podcast. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you continue to check into my videos and my podcasts. You can find me on the YouTube channel that you're watching it on, the Recovery Atheist. Please subscribe today if you haven't. You can also find me on the Recovery Atheist podcast, which I'm on many different platforms. You can find me on Pandora, you can find me on Spotify, you can find me on iHeartRadio, just tons of different platforms. You can even talk to Alexa and ask for me, and it'll just say, "Hey, Alexa, play the Recovery Atheist podcast," and it will play it. It's amazing about technology today. Outside of that, you can find me on Facebook, Del Bacon. I have a Recovery Atheist group through Facebook as well. And you can email me at therecoveryatheist@gmail.com if you're ever interested in getting a hold of me that way. I hope everybody out there is doing well. I hope your 2021 is going so much better than last year. And I just hope you're being safe out there, wearing masks, doing what you got to do for the family to stay safe. And I'm going to talk to you again here real soon. Love everybody. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Recovery Atheist podcast. It's now up to you. What will you do with what you've heard? How will you use it? I challenge you not to stay silent. Be heard. Be real. Be different.